Welcome back. This would be mini lecture number 2 in the Mr. Basile Explains Oedipus Rex series. So we are starting with the exposition, if you will, if we want to break it down into manageable chunks, so to speak, using your little plot graphs or plot charts. So this would be the exposition. It starts on page 31, halfway down the page. Enter Oedipus from the palace. Here he talks about how you have prayed and your prayers shall be answered with help and release if, and that's the caveat here, if you will obey me and are willing to put in hand the remedy your distress requires. Well, of course they are, because they trust him. He's totally helped them before. Remember when the winged enchantress, the vile, dog-faced witch, the Sphinx, right, was tormenting and plaguing their city 20 or so years ago, and he defeated her and saved them and, became their new king. So, of course they're willing to do that, right? And he says to them, he's out here and he's going to make a proclamation. If any one of you knows whose hand it was that killed Laius, the son of Labdacus, let him declare it fully now to me. And of course there's silence because it's Oedipus. Or if any man's conscience is guilty, let him give himself up. He will suffer the less. His fate will be nothing worse than banishment. No other harm will touch him. Yeah, and of course we hear the crickets again. Or if some alien is known to have been the assassin, declare it. The informer shall have his reward of me, as well as the thanks he will earn from all of you. Silence still. But if you will not speak, and any man is found to be screening himself or another in fear, I here pronounce my sentence upon his head. And so this is where he starts, you ever watch somebody mess up or really start digging themselves a hole when they're talking? You're like, hey, wait, stop, no, stop, cut it out. Oh boy, and you want somebody to stop, but they just don't. This is the best example you can probably find of somebody just digging their own hole. He digs himself the bottomless pit, practically. I mean, it doesn't get much worse than this. He says, no matter who he may be, that would include himself, he is forbidden shelter or intercourse with any man in all this country over which I rule. Side note, intercourse means talking with somebody. Okay, it's talking. So no one will shelter you. That includes the Greek idea of guesting. So that's done, that's out. That's kind of a big deal. And you're not even allowed to talk with anybody. That's extremely harsh. From fellowship of prayer or sacrifice or lustral rite is excommunicated. You can't worship. That kind of sucks because let's face it, being able to communicate with the gods is obviously important in this culture. It is seriously important, and it's not being allowed. You're expelled from every house, unclean, accursed, in accordance with the word of the Pythian oracle. Thus I shall have done my duty to the god and to the dead. Oh, the irony. Because he wouldn't be dead if it weren't for him, right? And it is my solemn prayer that the unknown murderer and his accomplices, if such there be, may wear the brand of shame for their shameful act, unfriended to their life's end. No, they did not have Facebook. They're unfriended. Nobody is going to, even your best of friends, will no longer be friends with you. They will wear a brand of shame. Shame is deeper than embarrassment. Sometimes people think that, I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed. Shame is deeper. It's much more meaningful. It's something that you can't wash away. You can't really shrug off. You have to wear it. You have to bear it. It's not something that can be erased or removed or made up for. It's, a scar on your soul, if you want to think of it that way. It's just, there's no moving. There's no leaving it behind or moving past it. It is always carried with you. So, nor do I exempt so that's pretty bad, but then he makes it even deeper. Nor do I exempt myself from the imprecation. If with my knowledge, house or hearth of mine received a guilty man, upon my head lie all the curses I have laid on others. So, yep, he's pretty much locked himself up here. It is for you to see this faithfully carried out, as in duty bound to me and to the God and to our suffering, plague-tormented country. So he's calling on the people of Thebes to make sure, like, hey, listen, I'm going to say this stuff, but it's your job, as much as it is mine, to make sure this actually happens. He says, indeed, I am surprised that no purification was made, even without the express command of, should be the gods or Olympus, not heaven, but whatever. The death of a man so worthy and your king should surely have been probed to the utmost. Be that as it may. So a little bit of shame on you there. Like, I can't believe you guys didn't take care of this before. But all right, listen, don't worry. I'll take care of it now for you. Now that I hold the place that he once held, his bed, his wife, and at this point, you're sitting here being skeeved out because that's his mom. And whose children, had fate so willed, would have grown to be another bond of blood between us. And you're like, oh no, you mean your brother's sons and your sister daughters, right? So it's pretty horrible because here he is. He's like, oh, I feel so badly for Laius, and here I'm going to help him as best I can. I mean, after all, I now have everything he once held. I have his wife, and I end up having the children that he would have had. It's just so horribly dramatically ironic, right? And upon him, alas, has this disaster fallen. And this is probably one of the best pieces of dramatic irony you can find. I mean to fight for him now as I would fight for my own father, and leave no way untried to bring to light the killer of Laius, the son of Labdacus, the son of Polydorus, the son of Cadmus, the son of Agenor. Right? So it's important because without that lineage, we would have no idea which Laius he was talking about. Or maybe we would. But that's the traditional Greek address. It's normal. I mean, they don't really have last names back then, so this is a way of clearing up exactly who we're talking about. Plus, this is a pretty famous royal line of rulers here, so being able to trace it all the way back there, it's pretty dignified. It's just a way of heaping honor, so to speak, upon the name of Laius. But really, let's not detract from the real star of this here. I mean to fight for him now, as I would fight for my own father. Oh, the dramatic irony is dripping off the lines, right? You can't get better than that. I mean, it is his own father, and I guess he's going to fight for him, but he's also the one who killed him, and leave no way untried to bring to light the killer of Laius. Now, so bringing things to light, I may have mentioned this before, and if not, well, let's talk about it now. Bringing things to light is part of the motif in this play about finding truth, bringing things into the light, taking things out of darkness, out of the unknown, and making them known, showing the truth, finding what is real. And this motif helps reinforce the themes throughout the play, which we'll talk more about at the end of the play once we have a better understanding of how all of these moving parts are working together. And then he goes on, the gods curse all that disobey this charge, so we're adding more weight to his words by, linking them with the gods and the gods' will. For them, the earth be barren of harvest. For them, women be childless. And may this present calamity, and worse than this, pursue them to their death. Well, there it is. There's the bottomless pit, right? He has dug himself, branded himself, destroyed himself through his own curse. And yet, as he'll say later on, is unwittingly self-accursed. He is, unbeknownst to himself, cursed himself as thoroughly as anybody could possibly do so. For the rest, you sons of Cadmus who are on my side, yeah, about that. He is the killer, so that's some more of that ironic, that dramatic irony shining through. May justice and all the gods be with you forever. Right? And of course, it's like, hey, who's going to speak out when you talk like that, right? And maybe if we ask Phoebus, he could tell us who it is. And Oedipus is like, you can't make a god speak. No mortal can do that. And of course, like, well, wait, I have an idea. And he's like, yeah, of course, I'll hear anything, right? And they're like, hey, this Tiresias guy exists. He knows all about divination. He's supposed to be awesome. And Oedipus is like, yeah, I know. I already sent for him. It was actually Creon's advice. So what's interesting here, Oedipus gives credit to Creon. I mean, that's pretty good, right? I mean, his ruler doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to say, hey, Creon gave me the idea. But he does say, Creon gave me the idea, which sets things up later on for Oedipus going off on his sort of hubristic track, which we will speak about later. And then they talk about rumors and old wives' tales and, they're being killed by travelers on the road. And then, Oedipus is like, well, where are the witnesses? And they're like, well, I don't know if anybody's going to speak up. I mean, you had a pretty nasty set of words. And they're like, well, who's going to worry about my words when they watched murder happen? I mean, isn't murder more terrifying? And they talk about how they're bringing the prophet in whom of all men lives the incarnate truth. And that's pretty heavy. to have somebody be touted as the incarnate truth. Incarnate means in the flesh. So this guy is living, walking truth. If you ever wanted truth to take physical, form, to become manifest, it would be in this guy right here, right? So here enters Tiresias the blind, which does matter, the blind seer, the blind soothsayer, truth teller, prophesier, if you will, right? So he comes in, and Oedipus is, basically says, hey man, I'm so glad you're here, right? You know everything. And he says, lore sacred and profane. He says, lore sacred and profane, all heavenly and earthly knowledge are in your grasp. In your heart, if not with the eye, you see our city's condition. Well, obviously he's blind. He doesn't see it with his eye. But notice that he takes the time to say it. Now, Sophocles hasn't mentioned eyes and seeing here, right? That's part of that building on that motif. So this isn't just an idle placement, right? He says, you see our city's condition. We look to you as our only help and protector. It's interesting. We have sent, and then we have told you to Phoebus, and he has answered. The only way of deliverance from our plague is for us to find out the killers of Laius and kill or banish them. And he tells them, hey, lay it on us. Tell us. Can you help us? And then he goes on to say, to help his fellow men with all his power is man's most noble work. So he says, hey, listen, part of our culture is to help others with all of your powers. And to do that, that's the best, most noble thing you can do. That's a pretty powerful statement, right? And so you get a little bit of the cultural value there too. And this is where Tiresias kind of has this moment oh, whoops. I didn't want to come here, right? He's like, wise words, but when wisdom brings no profit, to be wise is to suffer. And why did I forget this? Who knew it well? I never should have come. Now, if you're Oedipus, you have no idea. Of course, we're clued in, right? So we know exactly. Tiresias is kind of like us. He's the only character who knows it all, like the audience. So we totally get where he's coming from. We understand, I don't actually want to be here. I don't want to be the person to tell somebody that they killed their dad and married their mom and have this misbegotten brood of children. Nobody wants to be the bearer of that news. And Oedipus, of course, it seems to bring us a little encouragement. He's kind of disturbed by this. Let me go home. It'll be easier thus for you to bear your burden and me mine. Take care, sir. You show yourself no friend to Thebes, whose son you are if you refuse to answer. So in this, whose son you are, Tiresias hails from Thebes. Yes, I know. Everybody who's cursed and has a horrible life seems to come from Thebes. It's no coincidence. Thebes has a string of suffering characters across the Greek pantheon who hail from Thebes. Oedipus is not the only one. Anyway, he's like, you're no friend if you refuse to answer. And he says, because I see your words, sir, tending to no good, and therefore I guard my own, right? And notice, Oedipus, he gets mad really quickly. By the gods, if you know, do not refuse to speak. Well, I beseech you, we are all your suppliants. Tiresias, you're all deluded. I refuse to utter the heavy secrets of my soul, and yours. What? Something you know and will not tell? You mean to fail us and to see your city perish? I mean to spare you and myself. Ask me no more. It is useless. I will tell you nothing. Nothing? Insolent scoundrel, you'd rouse a stone to fury. Will you never speak? You are determined to be obstinate to the end? And when you're obstinate, you refuse to budge. You refuse to move, right? And Tiresias is here. Do not blame me. Put your own house in order. Oh, man. What a fantastic, backhanded insult, so to speak, right? It says, put your own house in order, which, when you know what he's talking about, makes perfect sense. Hear him. Such words, such insults to the state would move a saint to anger. Well, yeah, maybe, but it's definitely moving Oedipus to great anger. What will be, though I should never speak again. He says, what is to be, it is your trade to tell. I tell no more. Rage with what wrath you will. Right? And, he's going to rage. Okay, he goes full rage mode here. He's like hulks out, And then he blames the blind seer, right? He says, you must have plotted it, and if you weren't blind, I would have said you did it all, right? And so Tiresias, he gets mad himself. He's like, oh, yeah? Fine, you asked for it, you got it. You're the cursed polluter of this land. Oedipus, not knowing, of course, the truth, is offended, shocked, and is like, seriously, do you really think you can do that? And Tiresias is like, whatever, the truth is my defense. And Oedipus, he can't even believe this. He's disgusted. He's shocked. He thinks it's ridiculous. And Tiresias, and he's like, Tiresias is like, well, it's your fault. You're the one who made me say it. And Oedipus is like, well, say it again if you really meant it. Tiresias is like, well, wasn't it obvious? Oedipus is like, no, I want to hear it again. And so he hears it again, right? And then Tiresias is like, what, you want me to feed your anger some more? And he's like, yeah, I want more. Bring it on. And so he brings it on, right? You're living in sinful union with the one you love, living in ignorance of your own undoing, which makes no sense to Oedipus. How would he ever understand that? And yet we're like, oh, it's so true. It's so horrible. It's so awful, right? And Oedipus, what, do you think you can get away with saying this? Say things with such impunity, with freedom from punishment, right? Yeah, of course he does, right? Because truth has the power to save. And Oedipus is like, no, it doesn't. Not for you, you shameless, brainless, sightless, senseless sot. Okay, I love some good alliteration, especially when there's some insulting action going on here, right? All this S's is fantastic, right? But really, did we have to say sightless? Seriously? Sightless? The guy's blind. You're mocking him for his blindness? That is some incredibly situationally ironic stuff right there, because he is blind to reality. He's blind to the truth. Oedipus, I'm speaking of. Oedipus is blind to the truth, yet can see physically, while Tiresias, blind, sees the whole truth. So we have this fantastic situationally ironic position that's happening here, right? I mean, it's great. You are to be pitied, uttering such taunts as all men's mouths must someday cast at you. Listen, come back to this line. Mark it in your text. Come back to it at the end of the play. You will really appreciate it then. For now, let's suffice it to say that, you're going to mock me. Don't you worry. You're going to get mocked just as badly. And then we get the motif being hammered home again. Living in perpetual night, you cannot harm me nor any man else that sees the light. That's awesome, right? He talks about how he's living in perpetual night. He's blind. He can't see. But he can see. And you can't harm me nor any man else that sees the light. Well, you and all the men who see the light don't really see the light. They don't really see the truth. This is awesome stuff. And then Teresa's like, yeah, I'm not the one who's going to bring you down. Apollo is. And then suddenly Oedipus gets this idea, oh, it must be Creon. This is all Creon's doing. It's all Creon's fault. Creon's the one who told you to come here. Creon's the one who brought me here. He sets up this whole elaborate set of questioning, and he's like, oh, hey, wait a minute. It took poor ignorant Oedipus to come along and stop the Sphinx. Where were you when she was torturing everybody? I thought you should have been able to answer this. You're the soothsayer. You should have been the bright man. But no, it was me, right? And the chorus is like, hey, wait a minute. You guys are both mad. Maybe you better chill down, right? And Tiresias is like, yeah, you know what, though? I'm not done talking. And, you are pleased to mock my blindness. Have you eyes, do not see your own damnation? Eyes, and cannot see what company you keep? Whose son are you? I tell you, you have sinned, and you do not know it. Against your own on earth and in the grave. You're like, oh, on earth is mom. Oh, in the grave is dad. Oh, what? Can't see your own damnation? That's right, he does have eyes, but he can't see whose company he's keeping. He can't see that when he goes to bed at night, he's sleeping next to his mom. He can't see, his own damnation in front of him because he's the cursed polluter of the land, right? Whose son are you? Like, you're not the daughter, you're not the, daughter, you're not the son of Polybus and Merope. You're the offspring of Laius. You're his son. Bad news. Bad news. And then he says, your mother's and your father's curse shall sweep you out of this land. Those now clear-seeing eyes shall then be darkened. Then no place be deaf, no corner of Citharon echoless to your loud crying, when you learn the truth of that sweet marriage song that hailed you home to the fair-seeming haven of your hopes. So, that's fantastic, too. Just thinking about this, I really want you to come back to this moment again at the end of the play, because this is describing a complete reversal of not only his fortune, but of his situation, which, according to Aristotle, would be necessary for the very best tragedy to occur. And he talks about how, you shall be trodden down with foul or scored and that never fell on a man. And then Oedipus is like, oh, you know what, just get out of here. I can't listen to you anymore. Just get out. And then there's some spit spat back and forth about giving birth and who his parents were. Tiresias is like, today brings you your birth and your death. Oedipus is, must you wrap your words up in riddles? Well, I thought that was your fame for solving riddles. And he's like, you're taunting me with a gift that is my greatness. And he's like, your great misfortune and your ruin. It's true. Face it, if he had died with the Sphinx, it would have been better for everybody involved, right? Well, except Laius, he was already dead, but hey. Limiting our destruction of or fulfillment of the prophecy would have been better than the entire prophecy, right? I'm sure his mother would agree. So, no matter, I have saved this land from ruin. I am content. Oh, he is so not content, and he so has not saved this land from ruin. He's actually ruining it, right? And then Tiresias just lays it out one last time, He says again that, that man is here passing for an alien, a sojourner, which means a traveler among us. But presently shall appear a Theban born to his cost, which of course, if it's Oedipus and he's revealed to be Theban born, which he is, it's going to show it's awesome. He that came seeing, blind shall he go. Rich now, then a beggar, stick in hand, groping his way to a land of exile. Brother as it shall be shown, and father at once to the children he cherished. I mean, it's all laid out here. You can't get much clearer than this. Of course, it makes no sense to Oedipus and those listening, right? This is pretty awful. And then next we'll talk about this choral ode. So to discuss the first stasimone here on page 39, the chorus begins with, from the Delphian rock the heavenly voice denounces the shedder of blood, the doer of deeds unnamed. Who is the man, right? And so they're talking about the fates sure-footed closing around whoever this killer is. And we've got the order to hunt him out, to find him. And it says the deathless voices live in his ear. Again, we're still talking about whoever this murderer may be. And from the heart of earth they cry against him. This is an allusion to the Furies, which are embodiments basically of a conscience or a sense of, that you did wrong. And the idea is that they were called the Erinyes. They were torturers of those who had committed terrible deeds, and the idea, probably the most famous one of them, is named Tisiphone. And finally, I'll get to the idea I was trying to talk about. The idea is that they would torture those who had done terrible deeds until they confessed. It goes on to say, terrible things the prophet has spoken, and of course, because the prophet has accused Oedipus as being this terrible person, right? And they say, we cannot believe, we cannot deny. All's dark. Again, we're continuing this motif of light versus dark in the play. And then they sit here and question whether or not there's any reason for them to be arguing with one another or dislike each other, and they can't come up with anything. And then it says, of all the secrets of earth are known to Zeus and Apollo, but of mortal prophets that one knows more than another, no man can surely say. Wisdom is given to all in their several degrees, right? I impute no blame till blame is proved. He faced the winged enchantress and stood to the test, winning golden opinions. So there is no way to prove that any mortal prophet knows more than another because, hey, who knows for sure? Only the gods know, right? And Oedipus has proved himself before. He saved them from the winged enchantress, right? That would be the Sphinx. So again, going back to the fact that he saved them when they were in a calamitous hour before, and he's guided them through 20 years of peace and contentment and happiness, and now things are going wrong again. And so they say, hey, never therefore will I consent to think him other than good. This is pretty important to recall because this really sets up the idea of a perfect tragedy in Aristotle's eyes, and as any modern audience too is watching or listening, you have somebody who starts off as being thought of as the best of the best, so great, so wonderful. Never, therefore, will I consent to think him other than good. And yet, we'll come back to that later, because at the end of the play, in order for there to be a true reversal of fortune and situation, to be the very best tragedy, which this is, you'll find that something like this will have to be overturned. Not simply overturned, but completely reversed. And thus ends the exposition and first stasimone.